Hey, I'm supposed to be joined by people today, but I guess they'll come when they come. So Brandon just had his ankle surgery. If you guys haven't heard, he's around on a scooter. So if he can join us, great. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to hold down the fort until Brian joins us, and Classy will hop on at some point in the next 15 minutes. So today we're talking about the Sony VRR update, specifically for the X90J, X95J, Z9J, A90J, A80J, and oh, look, I guess Classy is free. Well, you come on down, Classy. This is like, I don't know what's happening, but and we're gonna do some comparisons. My connection is kind of wonky, so I'm hoping I can get some of these images. So what we're gonna do is go over some of the comparisons as far as VRR before, after. So many of you are asking, is VRR worth it? Do we need it? And the answer is it definitely depends on the game. So ask away, ask your questions, whatever you want. In the meantime, I'm going to do some comparison images that I took this morning on Elden Rings. Is that what it is? Yeah, let's see. Let's talk about the TVs that got it real quick. It is the 2021 TVs receiving the update A90J, A80J OLEDs, LCD TVs X90J, X95J, and Z9J, and all the 2022 Sony TVs with VRR out of the box. All right. So let's jump in there. Hey, Classy. I know you're working today. Thanks for making time for us, man. I love your icon of the blank face. All
Uh,
right. So
yeah, I'm in the car, so
go ahead,
just let me
bro.
know if there's any
I don't
echo
know how
or.
long I'm going to have you, Classy. So go ahead and tell us about what you compared. And I'm going to run this video real quick. People can watch this. On the right-hand side is the A90J. On the left-hand side is the X95J. On top, VRR is on. On the bottom, it is off. Now, this is compression YouTube. But if you notice, the difference between the A90J on and off, barely noticeable, if any. X95J, it is a little noticeable, but it's not as bad as you think. Okay, go ahead, Classy. What have been your observations on this?
Right. So when I was testing last night, I was testing on the A80J and looking for side effects or issues that the VRR would bring. Um, and overall, was pleasantly surprised. The only somewhat negative thing really just seems to be that input lag increases a little bit. So there's no drop in brightness, there's no change in gamma, color, anything like that. Um, and it does appear to be, full 4K resolution at full 120 hertz. Um, yeah, so it's just pretty much the only real negative was the input lag. So the difference between the LG and the Sony at 120 hertz with VRR on, and let's say on the Sony you have smooth gradation and reality creation on because I mean you would, that's why you got the Sony.
Hmm.
You're looking at about
Right.
2 frames of input lag extra.
When is it most noticeable? So you mentioned the input lag went up, but in what scenes or what activities or which game is it noticeable, and is it distracting, that extra bit of input lag?
Well, if you're coming from an older TV or even like a couple-year-old TV with game mode, it's probably going to still be about the same. Especially if you've been playing at 60 hertz, it's pretty much just going to have about the same input lag as if you were playing at 60 hertz.
Okay.
So the only way you would really feel it is if you are playing on an LG a lot at 120 hertz and you've gotten used to that 5 milliseconds input lag. Um, that's really the only time you'd be able to tell that. You know.
And what I definitely noticed is in this game specifically, right, Elden Ring, just the opening scene where you're running across the bridge, you go down the stairs. Without VRR, I definitely had stutter. Now I didn't see any screen tearing, but the stutter was noticeable, and I didn't realize it was stuttering until I had VRR on. I go, wait a minute, this is a lot smoother than I had expected, and with it off, going back and forth, I'm like, okay, there is definitely stutter. Hey, Brian's here. Welcome. And if you
Hey,
guys haven't
what's up,
caught
Bryce?
it, Brian did do his as well. Brian, what TVs did you update? What TV did you play?
77-inch Sony A80J OLED.
Okay, so that's the same as classic. I played with the A90J, and I was telling everyone that on Elden Ring there was stuttering without VRR. Resolution looked great, by the way. I didn't see any issues with a drop in resolution. Slight color differences. It
Okay.
appears that on well, I'll show you right here. On top is VRR. On the bottom, VRR is off. It's in its regular enhanced mode. It's a bit cooler on top. Obviously, they're both in game mode, so there's a slight color science difference between VRR on and off for whatever reason, right? But right in some of the scenes, I noticed. Just talk about the X95J. Would I have VRR on in this game? Definitely. I think the stuttering is a bit distracting, and the drop in the picture quality isn't as horrible as many had feared. So I wanted to show you this scene right here, right?
Were
So
you in
in the
the frame rate mode of the game?
cave below, on top, slight rather than picture quality, right? So I wanted smooth action. So definitely it was in frame rate mode. On top, slightly lifted colors. I guess you could describe it as slightly washed out. The bottom, it's a bit darker. Now, some might say that this is maybe crushed black. So the big difference is the cape in with VRR off, the cape is a bit blacker. So the blacks are blacker, are deeper, but it doesn't take away from the game, in my opinion. Although, yeah, slightly better on the bottom. But overall, I would totally game with VRR on, and I wouldn't think twice, right? I think it looks pretty good with VRR on. But that's enough
Yeah.
of my comments on the image quality. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
If I'm looking at those images, I would not want to play on the top one
Really, too watched
because
out for you?
it's not just too watched out, but the bottom image, it's the top image just looks like it's blooming.
Yeah,
So if
there's
you add
yeah,
if so without the local dimming, if it's gonna bloom like that, then when you get into an all black area, it's going to be very distracting. Then you add in a HUD. This game doesn't have many HUDs at the bottom.
right.
It could be a game changer.
Yeah, definitely. It appears slightly washed out on top. Overall, just Elden Ring as a game, I thought that world was pretty well designed. I mean, the graphics are pretty incredible,
Yeah, it's a
and
taxing title too. It's a hard game to run.
yeah, definitely. I'm very curious to see, is this exclusive to Xbox? Is the PS5 going to get it?
It's on
Uh,
PS5 and PC as well. And what's actually interesting is if you play on PS5, but you play the PS4 version of it with backwards compatibility, then it is like a locked 60 FPS. It just doesn't look as good.
Ah, got it. And maybe on the PS5, it may look even better on the Sony's because you know how the Sony has that contrast. Oh, and that's the setting that I prefer with the VRR on. You have to put contrast enhance on high, otherwise it's even more lifted. So I definitely left
yeah.
it on contrast enhanced high. If you're doing this on X95J, I think on the A90J it looks great regardless of what you do. But the X95J definitely contrast enhancer has to be on high to bring some of that contrast back. But I
Which
can't wait
which
to
is
see how the
crazy.
PS5. Uh huh.
Which is
Go
crazy
ahead.
because you're saying you have to do contrast enhancer to bring it back to normal in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Well, not even
That's
normal. It's to alleviate the lifted, some of
it,
that washed out. Yeah, with
yeah.
contrast enhanced on anything but high, it's just not. It's a bit worse,
Yeah.
Okay.
So also, since it's
and you know it's very
disabling the
distracting.
local dimming, you're going to lose brightness as well. So, the X95J is around 1,000 nits peak in HDR. So with that local dimming off, I would have to go back and look at my measurements, but I mean it's probably like 500 or 600 nits or whatever. So it's a pretty big drop.
Yeah, that's another thing to consider as well. And if it gets well without local dimming and you take it bright, then it becomes even more lift and it gets all bad. But I think overall, though, this is an issue with any LCD TV, right, Brian? I mean, this is why we want to game on the LG OLEDs, and now it's possible to game on the Sony OLEDs. I mean, let's take the X95J out of the equation. Like all LCD TVs, it's a compromise if you're going to game on. Now, I will have a head-to-head with the Samsung. At some point, you guys can see the difference to see if Samsung does it any better. But the reality is that with an LCD TV, it's unavoidable. They're going to shut down most of that local flow rate local dimming, if not all of it.
Yeah.
Whereas OLED, it looks phenomenal now on the Sony. I mean,
Yeah.
is there a case to be made to get an LCD TV for gaming at this point?
I mean, that's unfortunate because you already compromised the contrast ratio before this with blooming, lack of zones, the algorithm on newer LEDs, and now you're going to compromise it one step further. And then, no. I mean, unfortunately, if you end up with the specular highlights, even if they get compromised, if it's washed out without the contrast ratio, it's going to lose its impact. So you don't have the faster pixel response, you don't have the blacks, you don't have the contrast ratio. I wouldn't see any advantage at all to playing an LED, unfortunately, because even the specular highlights won't pop without the
Right,
contrast ratio.
right.
So that's compromising way too much, in my opinion. This QN90A, I can't wait to see how you feel about that, because when I played on it recently, it looked amazing.
Right, you had the 100-inch playing on that, right?
Yeah, the
And
98, but they did something with it where the local dimming, I think because the QN90A has like a game optimizer as well. As long as you bring that black level, like you would do with the LG, it does correct it. It does look better, but again, you have to make these little compromises.
Someone's at the front door.
right,
Yeah, there was a update.
and
I
and
don't
just
remember when,
speaking,
but there was something for Samsung that updated to help the local dimming in game mode at some
It looks,
point throughout the year.
yeah, it definitely looks better. I'll tell you that.
oh, nice, yeah, because I just got an update, and I'm behind on my updates on the
Yeah,
Samsung. I haven't watched. I've been watching the A90J almost exclusively. So when I did try the Samsung just for this comparison, I got the updates, and so but I didn't get a chance to play the game on the Samsung. I will do that tonight. I wanted to show
yeah,
you guys this image. This is where it's most obvious. Right, the top is VRR on, the bottom it's off. And you can see that it's deeper blacks and fine detail. And this is what you're talking about, Brian, where if you didn't have the bottom picture, the top looks okay. But then with the bottom picture, you realize, okay, the blacks are a bit blacker. Everything is just,
yeah,
it feels like it's a bit sharper when there's that much more contrast. And again, the
yeah,
top isn't bad. So if all you have is an X95J, without something to compare it to, I think you would find the game pretty good. The one thing that I found very distracting is when you go into the HDR calibration with the
yeah,
Xbox. Oh my gosh, the blooming is horrible because it's not even blooming; it's like lifted blacks because there's no flow rate local dimming, and you go into the calibration mode, and it just the patterns look terrible. But then once you get into the game, okay, you don't notice it anymore. So when you all start doing
yeah,
the HDR calibration on this, you're going to look at this and go, man, if the game looks anything like the patterns for the Xbox calibration, you don't even get to the game because you're so disappointed. But once you get into the game, it doesn't look as bad. But for sure, you know that local dimming is off and you can't even enable it, right? It's all grayed out. So, yeah, I
Well,
think,
well, yeah.
go ahead.
But when you take all these other we've talked about this on other live streams, the terrible HDR implementation anyway, and then you compromise that a step further. Like on OLEDs, I see blue or banding that shouldn't even be there because it's not quite black. It's like a bluish, smoky gray. You're doing that now to LEDs. It just gets ugly, and it's just because you're not even having real black in HDR anyway. So if you're saying something's
Right.
already bluish, now like something like Deathloop, now we're going to go a step further and compromise it more. You see what I'm saying? So it's not. That's where SDR is better. You can change it more, but it just
That is a good point. Yeah. And I played this on what Classy was saying is prioritizing frame rate. If I
Mhm.
prioritize image quality, would that change the contrast? And also, someone asked, thanks for the question, did I see the grid effect? So on a 65-inch X95J, this has never been a problem. The complaint has always been for the 75-inch and 85-inch X95J as far as
Yeah.
the grid effect. Did you notice the grid when you did your 100-inch X92J review, Brian?
I didn't see any grid effect on it. The thing we did find was the Netflix, the YouTube in-house app was terrible as far as artifacting.
All
So we
right.
thought it was the grid effect because it was lines everywhere, and then we put it on a Samsung, didn't see it, and then we used an external device and it went away. So that was just the onboard app, but I didn't see any grid effect. I never saw it in the 75 either. From what I hear, mostly it was the 85 in my community.
And some people have said that in the larger sizes, it is varying degrees of grid effect. So it sounds like it's a combination of size and panel lottery, right?
Yeah,
So if you have the size and you lose the panel lottery, it's like the worst. And if you have the size, it may be barely noticeable, but some say it's still there regardless. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's a lot like banding on OLEDs. You know, people don't think it's there until they all have them, and then now they can't stop seeing it.
right.
So
And not again, not everyone has it, right? Like Crypto Color Lights here, he has the X95J, doesn't notice any grid effect at all.
Mhm.
And also when you go online, the forums, the people that complain are ones that have it. Those that don't have it, they're not going to come online. So the percentage is
Yeah,
overrepresented by those who really are not having a good time with the grid effect.
yeah,
So yeah, if you have any question, guys, come on down. Oh, you know what? What I wanted to address also, and we talked about this. I don't know if you noticed this, Foxy, but side effects of the VRR update has been the HDMI handshake arc issues. Brian, what have you noticed? Because some people have said that their Dolby Atmos is no longer being read off the TV. It's like, wait, what happened to my Dolby Atmos? I
yeah.
haven't checked it myself, but it made
S-
me think about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did mine late at night, and as I went to do my PS or Series X A80J, I could not get my HTA9 to stop hiccuping,
Mm.
and disconnected it, reconnected it, and it just kept happening. Then the minute, if it wasn't something with ARC, you know, obviously the TV itself would be hiccuping if it was an issue. And once it went to the TV speakers, it was fine. So I haven't been able to recheck it, but that could be a problem, which would be very unfortunate.
So when you're in the VRR mode, the enhanced VRR on the TV, it's pretty much the same as picking enhanced without Dolby Vision, so it can do 120. So if you have your Xbox at 120, it's still the same problem that's always been there on, even going back to the X900H, is the Sony's, all of them with the Xbox at 120 hertz. If you don't use the uncompressed audio format, it drops out the audio. That's been there since so the 900H came out.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with it
So
till I
it's
did
not
yesterday. So
specific to this update, right?
No, and
Yeah. And
TechnoDad,
others have said they didn't.
and I tested that a while ago. Like that's always been like every update, people are asking me to recheck and see, and it's just always been like if you play on Xbox at 120 hertz with Atmos, the audio just drops out when using the
gee.
VR.
I mean, and that's again,
Right.
I love Sony,
So it's
but
for 120.
when you're talking about Xbox having Atmos, having 4K 120, having Dolby Vision, having all these things without issues, and then I go over to my Sony TV and I have to lose Atmos. I mean, it's we talked about paying more for less,
Mhm.
and that's really the
Well,
problem. Is
this brings up the does this make the Sony A80J a viable gaming alternative to the C1? And with all the issues related to CEC handshake and audio, I'd still say no because VRR is working, but now we have to wait for more updates to fix other things that has been there before. Basically, if you need 4K 120 on the Sony OLED, right? You're going to be compromised on other things that have nothing to do with the gaming, like just basic HDMI CEC handshakes, right?
yeah. I mean,
And the other,
go ahead, Glassy.
I was gonna say the implementation that I don't like is that you have to go to settings, go to channels inputs, go to external like go 5 menus deep to turn off VRR. So,
Yeah,
using Sea of Thieves as a prime example, it's a game that benefits from VRR because the frame rate is so bad, but it is a game that you see the VRR flicker. It's the only game that I see VRR flicker in the game, not the menus.
yep,
So, that one I would just turn, it to the quality settings, not have the 120 FPS in it, and then you'd want the VRR off, and it's just kind of a pain when you have a game like that to go that many menus deep in the settings to turn something off.
Agreed.
Well, and it's
Agreed.
arduous too,
Especially
because
if you're a
yeah.
gamer.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's arduous too, because I know sometimes with the Xbox, it's not just about doing that. You have to close the app, turn off the system in order for some things to take. So to Classy's point, it's like not only are you going, like once in a while, I know he probably has the same experience. You'll power on your thing, you get your game going, then you're like, damn, you go back out of the menu, go into the TV, and then a lot of times you have to close the app, then turn off the console, and then turn it back on in order for it to really connect. So that's a lot of extra steps that accumulate after time.
And for those who just joined us, the answer is yes. With any of the Sony LCD TVs, whether it's the X90J, X95J, with VRR on, you disable local dimming, so you will have slightly washed out colors, slightly lifted blacks. And I'll bring some of this back up for you guys to see. Right there. I guess this would be a prime example of that issue. Is here. The top VRR is on, slightly washed out. Colors are not. I mean, colors are okay, but then overall, it feels a touch washed out. On OLED, it's much more of a contrast HDR. It's a better experience. This is not terrible, but compared to what you can get with an LG C1, which is LG C1 is going for $1,800. That $200 difference is not big considering the level of image quality and overall execution. For gamers, serious gamers, you have to go with the LG at this point still, I believe. But do you guys disagree? Can you guys make an argument to go with a Sony OLED for gaming?
No, and the other thing too is with the two HDMI 2.1s, one being your eARC, if you have an Xbox and you want to set it to VRR all the time, because you're only putting the Xbox on it, but then you get a PS5, which it's going to get VRR, but it doesn't have it yet. Even if you got one of those splitters, then you have to deal with increased input lag on the PlayStation, or just swap your cables all the time and change the settings, and it just becomes more of a hassle with that essentially one HDMI 2.1 port if you're using eARC.
Yeah, I mean, I use all my inputs on the LG, so I
Right.
really couldn't give
Yeah.
any of them up. And the issues we've had with these receivers not having real pass through, that's not an option either. And even with a switch, as we know, they don't last, they break. And you have
Mhm.
different settings on each input for different consoles. So if you are sharing and using a splitter, a lot of times you want to go back in and change the settings. I think the 80J is excellent.
Yeah.
I haven't had any of the dimming issues at 77. I love it, but the flexibility with the C1, even the Dolby Vision gaming that none of us really like right now, it will be a factor at some point. So again, it's paying the same money or more for less is really the hard sell. If it was much cheaper, yeah, no question. But if it was more expensive or even the same price, it's hard to recommend if gaming is your focus.
The one thing that the Sony
Good
really does
question,
better,
James
though.
Hendricks. Will I be able to use? Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a delay. I didn't realize there's that much of a
Go
delay.
ahead, Classic.
I was gonna say the one
No,
real
no, that's
advantage
okay.
though is
I'll
that
answer the question
smooth
after.
gradation on the Sony works in not only game mode but with VRR. So the posterization in the skies and 120 hertz games, you can clear that up on the Sony with the smooth gradation. But that setting on the LG does nothing in game mode.
Yeah, I don't use that in
Well,
gaming
that's a
anyway.
great point. Yeah. And that's another point is how bad is, I mean, I think it's up to the game developer to fix up all that pixelation. And that's an issue that the TV is fixing something that maybe at the source level could be done. So James has a great question. Will I be able to use both HDMI 2.1 ports on the Sony? He has both the Series X and PS5. So the answer is yes, but if you are expecting to use number 3, that's your eARC TV.
Yeah.
You'd have to run it from either your Xbox or your Sony and audio straight from your TV. Use your TV as a switcher, which the LG allows you to do, right? The LG OLED, you can plug in 3 sources, and then on your 4th HDMI port, connect that to your audio system, and suddenly your TV is connected to everything, and your audio comes off of one port. the alternative is not as elegant. And so essentially it's 2 ports, but if you use both, you lose one audio out from the TV.
And you're already having issues with eARC anyway, so it makes for a pretty clunky experience.
Yeah. And thank you, CMS. Yeah, I've been having internet issues, so maybe I should know what happened with my internet here. I have gigabit connection at AT&T. Today, not so good. So, Brian, why don't you tell us about your video, and then we can get to Classy. But what was your observation of your video? What is your conclusion now that VRR, the much awaited update, is up? Disappointed? Not?
I was very pleased with it. I mean, I have the 80J. I typically don't use it for gaming simply because I have all the flexibility with the C1 and VRR. I ran Dying Light, which is important because Dying Light requires VRR to get to that 120 mode, which goes between 80, 90, and 100 FPS. And that's where this update is really important because you're not left out if you're a Sony fan that has an Xbox. So now, because you can enable VRR, you can actually use that thing in Dying Light. That mode makes the biggest difference because that 100 FPS makes the game look better. And I went from those games, Halo, which has a lot of flicker in the menus, and I went back over. And if I switched them back and forth, you wouldn't know. And I did a screen crawl, so I was extremely impressed with it. I was very happy with it. So I had no complaints at all.
Brian, people are a little bit of impression here. I guess get angry.
That's Rick. So the Van Damme one is like, Rick, don't worry about that one. I mean, the good mood. Don't worry. I'm not all business, Tristan. I'm just things are a little choppy, so I thought it was. No,
yeah,
right.
yeah, it's choppy on my end. I apologize again, but overall, I too am pleased on the OLED's implementation. Classy, how about you? Did it meet your expectations?
I pretty much always keep my expectations low, so I was expecting worst case scenario to be similar to the 900H. So it did exceed expectations, and overall, I'm pleased and happy with it. Like I said, there's just a couple things that I wish were different, like the whole changing at the input setting, to get the VRR and all that. But the small increase in input lag, I think, is fine for most people. And other than that, at least on the OLED side, everything's good. On the LCD side, the no local dimming, that does suck.
I mean, Classy for me, it's a no buy. It's not even an option. So if you're taking, I game 90% of the time, that means you're taking the Z9K out of my reach and the X95K before I even see them. If you're going to mess with the backlight master drive and the local dimming, then those two TVs are off. I mean, I'll still love them and review them, but they're not something I would purchase. And I didn't have to see them. If I know the local dimming gets compromised even a little bit in comparison to an OLED, then it puts me right back with OLED.
Yeah, I'd say it probably breaks that gaming camp down into 3 parts now. The people who really care go to LG. People who kind of care should be fine with it overall, but probably want to steer towards like a Sony OLED versus the LCD. But if it's someone who's just playing on a Nintendo Switch casually or whatever once in a while, then the LCDs are fine for that.
And that's a good point. I mean, I think breaking it down to 3, because you're breaking it down to 3 sources. You have the consoles differentiating, you have the TV manufacturers differentiating, then you have the actual developers of the games differentiating. All 3 are doing different things. And to your point, when you break down the use case, I'm somebody who games very hard, but I am a picture quality fanatic. And I want a cinema mode where I have local dimming. It's beautiful. And then if you want to give me a performance mode, that's fine for competitive. But if it's washed out, that's why I haven't bought a Samsung in years, for that main reason.
Yeah, that's why I went with the.
Now, we have a question here. Thanks for the super chat. I am so delayed, guys. I'm so sorry. I have lag here. If one of you guys could answer George's super chat, that'd be wonderful. I'm lagging out, so Can you guys hear me? Am I?
Yeah. Go ahead, Class.
Still on?
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, when it comes to the A80J versus the A80K, if that's what you're comparing, there essentially would be no difference in the 77-inch size. It would be so minor that it's absolutely not worth the price difference. And Chad was actually interested in buying my TV, but he's kind of far away, so that didn't work out. But yeah, I think we'll see a few $100 price drop in the next couple months as the new ones come out. And I would, if it's at 77 inches, I would steer towards a 80J over the 80K.
Yeah, I think they're going to be virtually the same. I know we've heard like retooling of processors. It's still the same cognitive processor. So to me, it's basically, it might as well be a carryover. It was such a win for them, and they cornered that market comparing with the C1 and C2. And unlike the C2, it's not claiming to be 30% brighter or more efficient or anything like that. So I totally agree. I would stay with whatever one's cheaper. And I would stay at 77 if you can.
I'm going to log out real quick and get back on. Give me a second.
Can you actually log out of your own stream? All right, Class, it's me and you, baby. Let's do it.
Yeah. Last night when I was doing the test, I was testing on PC also, and I had to do a restart and just jump right back in. So.
Oh, nice.
That was another thing on the PC. It's actually, I don't think most people realize the Sonys do have full 48 gigabits per second. So on PC, you can do 4K, 120, HDR, 10-bit, 444, everything.
And let me get this super chat real quick. Thanks, Thomas Morrill, for the super chat. Big flash issue on Flight Simulator. When you fly at night with VRR, change setting back to enhanced format with no VRR and no more flashing occurs. So this flashing appears to be an issue on the new Sony TVs on Flight Simulator now. You guys noticed that on your? I didn't notice flashing on Elden Ring, but I didn't know about what you guys noticed on your gaming, on the games that you played with the update.
I didn't see it in any gameplay. I saw it in the menus of Halo. Look at it was on both, but I didn't see it in any gameplay. But I believe them. It's a tough game to run, the simulator.
Yeah, so what causes the OLED flicker is massive changes in frame rate because the TV is trying to adjust the gamma on the fly. So typically in the actual game, you're not going to have those huge, massive frame rate changes. That's why I said if you play Sea of Thieves, you'll see it because that game is just not optimized well, and it does have just huge swings in frame rate. So you'll see the flickering in dark areas. So Flight Simulator, I know, is also very, very difficult and has lots of frame drops. So it could be one of the other few games that you see the flicker in the actual gameplay.
And if I can just say it, these consoles are so underpowered. I have to just say it. They're just so underpowered. That's why you're seeing such wild loss in frame rate. I mean, we're having to choose. I know we talked about this before these consoles even came out. This quality setting at 4K 30 with basically PC low settings, and these, I think Dying Light has its quality mode is like 30 FPS, ray tracing. They look terrible. It's just like these consoles. I mean, and I'll only rant about this for a second because we pushed HDMI 2.1 so hard, being necessary. And these consoles, you're talking about wild frame rates. I mean, Sea of Thieves should be easy to run with no problems. And PCs run this stuff. I have a GTX 1080 Ti and I'm running 4K 60. So it's frustrating to see that a lot of this that we're dealing with is frame rate swings. We shouldn't be having that at all this early in the life cycle of the consoles. That's just my rant. Got to do it.
Yeah, the biggest cause for that on the consoles is that they have very low-end, weak power supplies. They only can do so many watts, and they have to trade it back and forth between CPU and GPU. Whereas on PC, if you got an i9 and a 3070, and my computer's drawing 700 watts, that's the biggest thing, is just the whole EPA stuff. And even with the TVs, the OLEDs could be brighter, but it's their power supplies. They have to meet whatever requirements from the government or the EPA, and that's what limits them.
Yeah, I get that. It's just to not have to, whether it's a power supply issue, to have the marketing push HDMI 2.1 and all these features and not even come close to them. And then the excuses for consoles has always been, wait, they're not even tapping it yet. They're tapped. They're very tapped. So I mean, it's so whether it's the power supply or not, stop telling people they need. I mean, we were talking about 8K on these consoles, if you remember when these things first were coming out, and I have people with 8K TVs that are pissed.
Yeah, it's like the whole 8K and 4K 120 should have been saved for next gen.
Yeah, or your performance mode should be 4K, or your quality mode should be 4K 60. That's here's the and this is another rant. We had the last generation. PC gamers have been gaming at 1080p 60 for 15 years. I was gaming at 4K 60 for 6 years. I still had a plasma when I was running 4K 60. So to have the consoles be so behind and make everybody have that fear of missing out and then buying their TVs, and that's why the 900H to me is such a sad thing, because a lot of people really went after that thinking they were going to utilize those features, and the consoles can't do them. I'd rather see somebody have a 950H, to be honest, and just have a better picture quality than have to have
PC.
cut in half. Go ahead.
Yeah. The 2020 expectations. You guys mentioned that most likely the X95K, even with a mini LED, that doesn't solve the full array local dimming turning off with VRR. So for movies, what do you guys think of Sony TVs for movies? And what about gaming now for Sony TVs in 2022? Is it still a pause and don't think Sony for gaming? What are your thoughts on Sony in 2022?
Go ahead, Klaus.
So we're hearing that QD OLED won't have the VRR flicker, and if that's the case, that'll be a big improvement. But we're only 55, 65 inches, new technology, whatever. So I'm gonna put QD OLED to the side, but with the regular OLEDs, again, I think 80K is pretty much a refreshed A80J. And for the most part, I think the VRR is good on the OLEDs. The LCDs, I probably wouldn't use it very often or very limited cases, and it's a hassle to mess with. So, but for the movies, they're still great. I mean, that's one thing I'm going to miss when I change to the G2 is losing out on reality creation.
Yeah, I think.
Now,
go ahead, Fulmo.
No, I was going to say, what is it? What is the big difference with reality creation and without? Because the LG doesn't have it, but what is it that obvious when you don't have reality creation? What games are you looking at, or movies where it made the biggest difference for you, Classy?
Especially anything that's not pristine 4K quality. So, like I shown before on my G1 versus A80J comparison, just watching YouTube, watching the smoking tire, and I took a picture where on the LG the tire was flat, like it just completely you couldn't see anything. But on the Sony, you could make out all the letters and numbers on the tire and see what size tire it was. So the reality creation really does bring back that detail from lower quality content.
Yeah, that was that was always its intent, was primarily for lower quality content. I think people really go heavy with it, which can create aliasing and artifacting. That's why I don't use it, because I don't really watch that lower content. But as far as Sony this year, I think the one thing I didn't like about what they did the last couple of years is simplify their LED lineup, where Samsung is still doing 6, 7, 8, 9 series, and then their 8K lineup. To me, Sony going with the X95 and then a Z9J and then the 900 series, I didn't like that they simplified that. But the OLEDs were great last year. They'll be great this year, and they'll be great all around. I just wish they had more options like Samsung does in terms of the LEDs. That's just for regular watching, not just gaming.
Now, some are saying that the reality creation is more of a sharpening, or is it smoothening?
It's a sharpening.
Is your take on what it's a sharpening? Is that what you guys feel it is?
To me, it's more. To me, it's more of a sharpening than.
It's a contrast-based detail enhancer that pretty much does what you would think a sharpness setting on a TV should do, but a sharpness setting doesn't. It's not contrast based, it's just edge enhancement. So you don't get, as long as you keep reality creation low, like 20 or less, or on auto, then you shouldn't get any ringing or uh, you know, distractions or any kind of artifacts. At least on the XR TVs. The X1 TVs weren't as good, but the XRs, the reality creation better.
Now, we know what it's doing to the X95J in terms of the image quality with VRR. I don't think anyone else is going to be able to solve this because as long as you turn off local dimming, I think the effect will be the same on the other TVs, right? I mean, is there someone out there who's promising full local dimming with VRR? Samsung came close with that FreeSync Premium Pro, but I think the effect is still the same on the Xbox Series X. It's slightly off, and I'll do a comparison at some point, but moving forward, are you guys thinking that most TV companies are just going to give up on full local dimming and VRR and just focus on selling OLED for gamers?
Well, I think it's such a new issue. I mean, people are forgetting that VRR has been around for eternity with G-Sync and FreeSync, but with TVs, considering the 950H didn't have it, last year was they just literally 900H was their first time kind of offering it. I think it's a new problem, so you can expect it to take a year or so to figure out. The challenge is though, if you're going to try and figure that out with the backlight master drive and mini LED, that's counterintuitive. So I think they might be able to say, and I love Sony, but I think they might be able to check this box and say, look, I gave it to you. Let's get back to business, which is focusing on picture quality and cinema picture quality. So I don't see them spending much more time on it.
Okay, so let's talk prices. Jamie asks, in your opinion, will Sony maintain, raise, or lower their 2021 prices now that VRR update is out?
No, it won't have any impact on their pricing.
Right. I don't think so either. I don't think it changes
I don't see
anything.
any reason for them to increase price for something that they just pretty much have to implement after promising it.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, they really, and you know what, Classy, the only place they really promised it was with the 900H. That was the one they really had to cover. But their literature was like available and then upon updates. So as far as pricing, the allocations were so small last year. There's very little inventory. They don't need to change prices based on that at all. So I wouldn't expect that. I'd expect, as Classy mentioned, when the A80K comes out, it's only natural that the A80J will drop, but don't expect like we had the last few years where there was enough and then they drop it to clear out inventory. Inventory is already gone.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about where OLED is going because I feel that they're now fine tuning the features that matter to people in OLED, like gaming, VRR. I think as far as image quality is concerned, OLED's reached close to where it has to be as far as maturity. And now it's fine tuning the little things, near black, VRR, perfect motion. And in a few years, it's going to be such a solid TV, even with its limited color gamut, because I think it looks great with its 80%, 75% of BT 2020. Where are you guys on with OLED? I mean, is it more than just a gaming TV, or do you guys think that you might update from OLED because FOMO?
Go ahead, Class.
I mean, I'm gonna get the 3-inch G. I mean, I'm already at the top of the list for that as soon as they come in. And then the QD OLEDs, I'm not gonna own one this year because I have no reason to own a 55 or 65 inch. But I probably am going to own the QD OLED Alienware monitor. But that's kind of a different thing, being 3440 by 1440 ultra wide. I just figured that the increase in color depth, color volume would be good for editing videos. Getting the new MacBook Pro, trying to edit for videos and stuff. Figured that'd be a good display for it.
For me, it's QD OLED is the most enticing, but by the time that goes to market to where I'll be interested in it, it'll be about 3 years. I'm at 83 and up, so even if they come out with a 77-inch, I won't go down in size now. So I'll have to wait about 3 years, and at that time, you will see micro LED. So we'll be back having the same exact conversation if micro LED is exactly what's been promised. I think mini LED is a stopgap, to be honest. I think micro LED and QD OLED are going to be amazing. But by the time I'm ready to purchase that, like, I'm changing out my C1 this year. And, it's for my keeping a TV as much as I want QD OLED, especially after watching Caleb's video. It's still going to be a number of years before it's something that I want at my size. So OLED is still where I'll stay simply because of the topic of today's video. I mean, it's taking away the TVs I wanted this year, the Z9K and the X95K. So I'm already going G2 by default.
They do, but you guys are seeing where they're raising prices in order to get the additional technology. You almost have to go 8K, with the exception of QD OLED. That only comes in 4K. Either of you have any interest or think 8K is going to have any legs in the next 2 years? Or when will it become relevant, actually?
I don't think 8K will become relevant until the new NVIDIA or Radeon cards come out and can actually do 8K gaming, and that's going to be the first set of people that will make that move. And then probably 5 years from now, we might start seeing 8K, either discs or streaming or whatever, be more mainstream. Right now, it's just quite early, and it's very, it reminds me a lot of the 3D days where you were waiting for the content to catch up with the 3D TVs that they pushed out so early, and then by the time the content caught up, people were kind of over it. And so I don't know. I think the 8K is going to struggle for a while.
Yeah, I agree. I think 8K,
Agreed.
8K will become commonplace when they force our hand. And Sony's already kind of doing that, where the Z9J was clearly better than the X95. If you wanted the best LED last year, you had to go with the X95 or the Z9J. If you wanted the best Samsung last year, you could have gotten the Q190A. Eventually, they're going to force your hand with that and say, okay, look, our flagship's 8K. I say that, but in the meantime, we're getting 100-inch 4K TVs and 100-inch OLEDs. The problem with 8K is there is no promised content. There is no promised format. There is maybe streaming coming, but with at least 4K, we knew there was a Blu-ray standard coming. There's no talk of that for 8K. So it ends up becoming, and then also on top of that, upscaling, as Classy mentioned, with reality creation, anything below 1080p looks horrendous on an 8K display.
Yeah. And
As you all know.
also for many of those watching or interested in 8K, you have to remember that to get 8K to feel like 8K, not only does your TV have to be large enough, but you have to have at least 120 frame rate on 8K so that the resolution matches the actual pixel resolution. Otherwise, 4K looks indistinguishable from 8K at 60 FPS or less. So can you imagine the processing to get 8K and 120 frame rate? It's not just 8K 30. That's the still image, right? But if things are moving around, it's going to look 4K. It's because the blur in 8K renders it a lower resolution effectively. And so recent experiments have shown that you could not distinguish between 8K and 4K if things are moving around unless it's 8K at 120 or more. So that's a nightmare of codec and compression if you guys are thinking 8K content.
Well, with my 8K, when I had the 900R, I used that club DisplayPort adapter to do 8K gaming. Like games like Dishonored, older titles, you couldn't move much. It was so clean, but again, it would be clean at 30. Even with the GPUs that Classy and I want, you're still going back to that 8K 30, which is hard to go to. And then it just doesn't mean the local dimming will be better. And I brought up this comment too, as far as we were told with 4K it was because of size, and we needed to upgrade. And then Sharp released a bunch of 1080p TVs. If you remember, they were very cheap Well, now the industry is saying we need 8K, but here's a 100-inch X92, a 98-inch QN90A. They're not 8K. So they're kind of contradicting their own methodology and what they're preaching. And I've seen both those TVs. I've spent time with them. 7 feet away, they look fine. You don't say I need 8K. So it kind of defeats the entire concept of, once you get past 85, and 90 and 100, you start looking at projectors, and it has no place is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And
And there was a good. No, go ahead, Classic.
I think the best current place for 8K is the new JVC 8K projector with a Mad VR NV, that kind of situation. Just other than that, it's just way too early and probably never will be fully utilized.
And the problem is, Classy, we're saying it's way too early. I know you and I are saying that, but you're like 5th year in. And we're like, so I know we're both, I say the same thing. It's too early, but the fact is it's been around for so long now. I do feel bad for the people that had bought one, that once the 8K, hey, I have it, goes away, you're like, wow, now I'm just stuck with this thing that costs that much more. Like a QN900A, I like that panel. But if you're somebody who had the 950T and those, you're like, wow, my TV costs 10 grand. And I'm not even utilizing 8K. And then, Foma, we talked about the codecs in the future. Will they even utilize the codecs that we have in these existing displays? So could you imagine the Z9G, which I almost bought? It's useless for 8K.
Yeah. And recently the VVC standard is being approved, but no TV, I believe, has that processing for VVC. So that's already behind the time, right?
So you're like, man,
yeah.
like it's 8K if I want to use my 8K camera and show pictures of my family.
Yep. And someone had a great comment where they're saying that a lot of the stuttering issue is maybe it's up to the developers, the software developers, to fix that up, because VR wouldn't be necessary if the game itself doesn't have the frame rate variability, right? They're pushing it back on the developers. Like, let's not brute force and fix the developers who are too lazy to clean up the code. Now, you guys are gamers. Where do you think the developers, what should be their role? Is this something that they should be cleaning up and then letting our TV do its job to lock 8K, 4K, 60?
Go ahead, Classy.
If you look back forever, the frame rate's always been a problem, especially on consoles. I mean, it's like the 360 PS3. At the end of that, we were getting like 12 to 15 frames per second on some games. Like, they want to push the graphics so that it looks good in the video at E3 or whatever, so they can sell the game. And then people buy the game and they have a horrible experience playing it. Yeah. So VRR is good that it can help those situations. But like, I would like to see the VRR flicker go away. So if QD OLED really does fix that, and in a few years we get a bigger QD OLED with no VRR flicker, and whatever, that would be great. It just sucks, right now that there are some games you see the flicker in it, but for the most part you don't. So right now it's all right. But yeah, I think them leaning on VRR on some games that are really pushing graphics, I don't have a problem with that. But it does suck for people who don't have that option. So like Elden Ring, if you don't have VRR, it's a rough game to play.
So I'm gonna rant real quick because this is not my channel. The gaming industry is an absolute broken mess right now. So to say that you want the developers to fix code, they can't bring you content. I got Battlefield uninstalled. I don't play Call of Duty. Halo's got 3 maps. There's no content and there's no talent. So gaming, they're never going to take care of what we want it to. There's no originality. There's no nothing. I've never seen it this bad, but the technology looked good in terms of us talking numbers. But as far as creativity, we're having games that are not even near completion. We're having games that are promising features like scoreboards. Like Halo is the same game it's been. I love Halo, but like this promised content, guys, they're not going to do anything with performance if they can't even put characters in the game. So, I mean, it's disheartening. I mean, I'm back on PC playing games like Alan Wake because I'm looking for something that's a little bit original. So I can't see them actually coming in and doing any of the technical stuff because they barely have the crew to handle creativity. They're busy with microtransactions more than they are with performance. Hello? This lag, bro.
My connection is still terrible. I'm looking at live
I
stream
love
like, oh
I
man.
love that we're all technology people and we have all this technology and we're like, damn, my internet's messing up. But that's how I feel. I just feel like, we have all this brute force, but it's like we say with the movie industry. We have the ability to make things look real with CG, but the creativity is absolutely bankrupt. So it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I can't see them picking up the slack.
Okay, here's a great question from Brad, guys. Go big QLED or 65-inch QD OLED? $4,000 budget.
Brad,
Can't go small.
yeah, get the big Samsung. You've been waiting for it to drop. It's dropping. Like, been talking about this for months. Just do it.
Who's this, Brad? Brad, I got something for you. So, Brad, I had to use my smaller panel because I had some construction at my house. When people tell you if you get closer to a smaller TV, it's a bigger TV, that is not true. So, if you need a larger panel, don't hesitate because you can make that panel look better, but you can't make the QD OLED look bigger. You just can't. So, if you want the size, grab the size. Immersion and great picture quality will always beat perfect picture quality.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is right now, pretty much 99% of HDR content has been made in DCI-P3 color space, which the current TVs do all of. So that extra color gamut that you get with QD OLED, you're gonna have to wait for the content to catch up.
Yeah, it's like when we did the quantum dots. Remember the quantum dot? You're like, oh my god, I can't wait to see that. And you're like, oh, actually, it's not there. And that's why 12-bit is so funny. We're like, oh, we gotta go 12-bit. You're like, yeah, but then you get that whole other thing. Is it real 12-bit? And is the content there? You're like, no. So it's the cart before the horse, like you mentioned.
All right. That's and I have to apologize. I break up. Oh, I think my internet connection is a little bit better, but maybe. So let's say we'll collect a few last questions. If you have any, please ask us anything. It doesn't have to be Sony VRR, it could be whatever. We're going to wrap up in about 5 or 10 minutes. I'd like to thank our guests, Whisper Status, also known as Brian. We linked his video below. And of course, Classy has a great video about VRR as well, or the Sony VRR update. But let us know what you guys want to know. Does this make a difference for you in determining whether you will get a Sony TV, whether it's or a LED, the X95K backlight master drive?
And I guess a little off topic here, the whole thing with Dolby Vision gaming, not only is like the implementation horrible on the game side, I've measured Dolby Vision game mode on the LGs, and it's awful compared to just using HDR10. So, like, I know Vincent has shown games on both, but that's after calibration, and we all know 99% of people aren't going to calibrate it. So, for most people, if you play Dolby Vision gaming on the LGs, it is not good. Like, it is completely lifting the midtones, and it just, I don't know. And like Halo got a new update that supposedly fixed the Dolby Vision on it, but it's still not the dynamic metadata Dolby Vision gaming that we were wanting.
Yeah. Now, my only counter to that is a lot like a condom. I'd rather have it than not have it at all. And like HDMI 2.1 and VRR, it sometimes gets used for things that wasn't meant to. So as we mentioned, HDMI 2.1 wasn't needed, but it was needed for Ratchet and Clank to do 40 FPS. That changed that game. VRR, not necessary. It changes dying light. So I totally understand, Classy, what you're saying. But on a dime, that can change. The right developer could change that. And then the people I'm telling don't worry about Dolby Vision are like, damn, but that other game came out. So I feel like that's the worst part about gaming is that it does give you that feeling that you don't need certain things until you need them, right? We told people as long as you were doing 4K 60, you didn't need HDMI 2.1. And guess what? For Ratchet and Clank, for 40 FPS, you do need HDMI 2.1. Do you follow me? So I just hate that for all of us. We're like, you don't need that because of this. And then right away, I'm like, yeah, but that new game does use it the right way. And that's the part that I think kind of sucks about the industry is it does get us the whole FOMO buyer's remorse dynamic is so interesting. You are saying, hey, Dolby Vision, it is crap. Believe me, I don't like it. I don't like HCIG on games that don't support it. But I'm so glad that I have that option because the games that do support it look fantastic. So I think Dolby Vision is going to be very similar. And in 2 years, if someone with a Sony TV has a game where they say, oh my God, Dolby Vision looks amazing, I'd hate to be the person saying, well, I don't have it.
Yeah, that's a good point. 'Cause, I mean, you certainly
thank
don't
you
know
guys for
if
coming on.
when.
Go ahead, Classy.
Yeah, you won't know until it happens, Classy, and you're like, damn, all right.
But yeah, that's waiting for developers to do it, and hopefully they do one day.
Let's hope, brother. Let's hope.
And again, I apologize to everyone. I know my connection is horrible. My audio is cutting out. My video is jumping all over the place.
That's all right. We carried it. We carried it. We carried it. Classy and I had you. Classy and I had it.
All right,
Classy
so
and I had you.
I'm going to wrap it up for you guys and just give you FYI, I am putting a head-to-head with the Samsung have what I think is the leader in gaming on a non-OLED is the Samsung, but we'll see. Also, any last comments? What do you guys have happening this week on your channel?
Go ahead, Class.
He was breaking up a lot for me. Yeah, I'm gonna be working on a lot of Dolby Vision tests here soon, and then I'm selling the A80J this weekend, and I'm gonna get a Samsung placeholder until the new Samsung comes out, so I can compare this year to last year. So I'm thinking the 900A 65-inch to compare to the 90B 65-inch, to compare the new one to the best of last year, something like that.
Nice. I'm looking to do some more short throw, long throw projectors next week. Spare Change and I actually have a studio space, so we'll be doing a lot of head-to-head TVs. The C2 comes out at the end of March, so we'll have that at 83 and 55 within the G2 and then the Samsung. So looking forward to really hitting these TVs at the large size and then bring the small size home and doing more audio, higher end speakers. But with the studio space, we're going to have the room to do long throw projectors versus OLEDs. So that'll be exciting. So stay tuned. And we're doing movie reviews. I'm going to see Batman tomorrow with Spare Change. So I can't wait for that. So a lot of different content coming from me.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining in and putting up with my stocky.
Always
photo,
a pleasure, bro.
Video, audio. Hopefully things are fixed. I'm gonna have to troubleshoot when I get off.
It's ironic actually that we're having frame FPS issues on a VRR video. It's ironic. Like, geez, it's like a slideshow.
and as Brad says, I think the Russians are hacking my show for whatever reason.
Oh, they're coming after you.
I made my political affiliations known, so I have no idea. But thank you guys for carrying the show today. I'm so glad you guys came on, because if it was just me, it would be a nightmare. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Classy, for coming on.
Our pleasure.
Don't forget to catch their channel, guys. Linked below. Until next time, let's pass the remote.
Cheers.